My name is Aaron Celaya. I'm a lieutenant colonel with the United States Space Force. But today, I'm here in my personal capacity as a member of the Attention and Cognitive Control Laboratory with the University of Oxford. And today, I would like to talk to you about quantifying metacognition for human-centered automation. But first, the views expressed today are my own and do not reflect the official position of the U.S. Space Force, the U.S. Air Force, the Department of the Air Force, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. I imagine that some of you may have come to this talk wondering, what is a metacognition? I'm going to come just to learn what that is. Or you might be thinking, what in the world does metacognition have to do with technology? And we're going to go over those two questions throughout the period of this talk. So let's first start with metacognition. Put very, very simply, metacognition is thinking about one's own thinking. And I know that sounds a little bit flaky, but it's actually a very in-depth science that goes all the way back to the time of Aristotle, which is when some of the first writings happened on this particular topic. Comte's paradox states that the human mind can observe any phenomenon in the world except the phenomenon of itself. Metacognition aims to get at that paradox and to do that research. And so it uses tools such as introspection, the ability to look inside of oneself and to make an assessment about your own knowledge, about your own feelings and perceptions of the world. And so you might be sitting here asking yourself, okay, I think I kind of get it. So why is an experimental psychologist with a space background here talking at the technology conference? And what I want to do is show how metacognition is not only an important but a vital piece of any technology that you create or that you deploy. And so to put this into context, how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hands, but thinking back on your own life, how many of you have ever raised your hand in class to answer a question? Hopefully, yes, thank you. Oh, good, yeah, nice, great. So hopefully most of us have. And when you do that, you are making an internal assessment. You are checking your own confidence against what you know or what you think that you know. You're making an assessment of the social impact of answering that question. And so we use confidence all the time. That's one of the measurements within metacognition. Confidence. Confidence permeates almost every aspect of our lives. Well, if you're talking to an experimental psychologist, at least that's what I'm going to say. So confidence is everywhere. It's in how we walk, it's in how we talk, it's in how we think, and it drives our behavior. So whenever you get up to give a presentation, you want to present yourself as being confident, even if you don't feel that way. Some people call that imposter syndrome. But there's a social benefit to acting in a confident manner because it drives up trust. We just heard Matthew talk about trust. We just heard Matthew talk about data and about how people didn't trust that data. What if there was one thing that I could tell you that would completely change the trust landscape in your organization or in your tech? One thing that could completely change the trust landscape. Now, before we go down that path, let me define trust. So trust to me is not just how good that something is, but oftentimes that's what we hear, especially in the tech space. If it's better, then people will trust it more. And as an experimental psychologist, I would like to push back on that. Trust is not just how good that something is. When you define it narrowly like that, you put at odds human diversity. I can't force someone to trust something as much as I can't force them to like pizza. I can't force them to feel comfortable on an airplane, even though the reliability rate of an airplane is quite good. So trust is the ability, is your belief about another entity to do its given task regardless of your ability to control it. That's what trust is. And trust in a human-machine team, we theorize, is going to follow the same patterns as in human-human teams. So going back to the old management literature, when we talk about human-human teams, a trustee is comprised of three things: its ability, its benevolence, and its integrity, or its ABI. Ability is only one of those factors. How good it is only one of those factors. Benevolence and integrity are other factors. So again, how good it is just a part of that entire equation. And then you pair the trustor, you take what they bring to the table, all of their human diversity, you bring that into account, and you match that with the ABI of the trustee, and then you have a formula that gets at a trusting relationship, or where trust can be apparent. And so, going back to the confidence piece, confidence is an internal thing. It's the probability that you feel that you are correct. So again, trust, external; confidence is internal. Okay, and those are going to be important terms as we go throughout this conversation. One other thing, for me, for AI. AI is a prediction-based capability. So not all AI is automation, but not all automation is AI. And that's a very important distinction to make, because the probability of being correct for a rules-based capability is much higher than a probabilistic one, which drives then the ability to have more variance in a trusting relationship. This is going to be very important as we talk about that one thing that I said that could change the entire trust landscape. And that's going to be confidence and communicated confidence. And again, we do this all the time. Imagine in court, okay? In court, a lawyer might try to get you to be confidently wrong about some mundane part of your day. And that, in somewhat legal terms, is wrong in one, wrong in all. So people who are confidently wrong lose trust more readily than someone who calibrates their confidence. And what I mean by calibrates their confidence is that if I'm trying to give you directions to the next lecture hall, and if I say it's down the hall, it's the second door on the left, that's a very confident answer. If I was wrong, you're probably not going to come back to me for directions again. Now, if I say I think it's down the hall, maybe one or two doors down, but I'm not sure. And if I'm wrong or right, there's a little more leeway given to me because I've calibrated my answer according to my own internal estimate of the probability that I am correct. So with this metacognitive understanding now, how does this apply to tech? And so for me, I like stories, I like movies. I am a Space Force officer. I'm not going to talk about Space Force, but I am going to talk about space via Star Wars. So how many people in here like Star Wars? Do I have any Star Wars fans? Yes, okay, good, yes. Some enthusiastic hands, nice, good. So this is from Star Wars: A New Hope. This is where they're getting ready to go take out the Death Star. So you can see the X-Wing, which is the fighter. You can see the Death Star there, and then there's this trench. The objective was that they had to fly down this trench and then launch some photons or torpedoes or some ordnance of some kind down into a certain target. It was a very hard target to hit. So in the top right, you can see this shaft that they had to launch the ordnance down. It had to be a direct hit. Okay, according to a Wikipedia, so not Wikipedia, Wikipedia, which is a Star Wars-centric database. That is a 2-meter wide hole, and this little targeting computer is going to be a very important part of this conversation. So the targeting computer is what the pilots would use to help them make that shot, because there's a lot going on. It's a huge distance. You can see the number that counts down as they get closer. And so what happens is the first set of fighters goes in, they get destroyed. The next set of fighters go in. So, and then at this time, the TIE fighters are out, Darth Vader's out, trying to keep them from hitting this target. And so then the leader is getting very close. He says, almost there, almost there, as these red bars go in. And then once it's within range, or once it has ID'd the target, it blinks and it makes a loud sound. And then he releases it and he says, it's away, and then he pulls up. But it missed. But the ordnance missed. Okay, so what that's called, so what you're about to see happen is something called algorithm aversion. It's where someone sees an algorithm perform poorly, and then they don't use it. That's what is in the research is called algorithm aversion. And so then what happens then, next, of course, to complete the story, sorry if you haven't seen this, spoiler, is Luke then comes in, and he's got his targeting computer up, he's got his 2 wingmen back there, a lot's going on. His wingmen are getting destroyed. One of them is his friend. So there's a lot going on in his mind and heart, I'm sure. His dad is chasing him. He didn't know that was his dad at the time, but Darth Vader is trying to chase him down. And then his stabilizer goes out. R2 tries to fix it. There's a lot going on. In most cases like this, you would think that a heuristic response would occur, meaning they would just fall into their training and they would just do it. Luke happened to be someone who wasn't classically trained with the rebels. He learned in a beggar's canyon back home, as he said, right? And so what happens is that he didn't have that heuristic response to just trust the training. Instead, he turned off that targeting computer. And as soon as he did, everyone knew that it went off, and they said, Luke, what's wrong? Why aren't you using your computer? And he's got Obi-Wan's voice in his head saying, don't, let go, trust, use the Force. And so to complete the story, he then makes the shot without the targeting computer, using the Force, makes the shot into that hole, and then takes out the target before they can take out their friends. So what we just witnessed was algorithm aversion. Believe it or not, this happens a lot with everyday tech. We'll see it mess up, we'll not use it as much, or we'll change the way that we use it. Humans do this all the time. Think about your targeted ads that you get on the computer. You may have checked those out the first couple of times, but then you just scroll right past them now. Your sat nav, if you know that there's a lot of traffic going on, if it doesn't have regular traffic updates, you might ignore it if there's a heavy traffic. This happens a lot. It's where we lose trust because of the ability piece in that particular piece of tech. So I want to talk a little bit more, though, about that targeting computer. So the topic of this talk is how do you quantify metacognition for human-centered automation? So then, if we really focus in on the targeting computer now. So what was going on here? There was some, in the script, someone said that it's too narrow, the towers are in the way, there was debris, there was smoke, so this targeting computer was being blocked. It was being blinded at certain times, and it couldn't perform optimally. But even though it still gave the indication that you could hit the target. What this is called in the research is a judge-advisor system, or a JAS. So there's a human judge, a computer advisor, and they work together in a team. And like how Matthew was talking about in the previous talk, that those human-machine teams, the manned-unmanned teaming, how do we optimize decisions? This is one of those ways through judge-advisor system studies. And so if you can envision this targeting computer then being blinded, so there are puffs of smoke, there are turrets, and then the ship itself, the stabilizer is going out, the pilot is under duress. A lot of things are happening. In a research sense and in a development sense, how do you quantify that? And so rather than give an aspirational talk on what you could do, I'm going to tell you what we did at my lab back at the University of Oxford. So what we did was, if you were to take something like this, so you have two fields of view, two planes, and you just simply turn them into dots. So what this does is it gives you a quantifiable amount of space on the perceptual field. What these are just two boxes. They have 400 locations. 200 at random are turned into dots, and they're randomly spread throughout the stimulus. Then you can add and take away dots from each side to make one side have more dots than the other side. So as you can see here, one of them has more. I don't know if you can tell which. But in the experimental design, we only pop this up on the screen for 160 milliseconds. It's actually very hard. Each dot is 2 pixels big. This is a hard task for any type of human user. And the great thing about this, though, is that you can actually quantify the difficulty by the dot difference, by how many dots are different between those two boxes. You can quantify it. That gives you a measurable level of difficulty. Because if the task is too hard, people will just default to another advisor and think that the advisor can make up for the risk that they can't accept in that task. If it's too easy, they'll just forget the advisor. So there has to be some sort of meaningful pairing, and there's a whole other conversation about how you do that. But right now, we're just talking about how you quantify metacognition. And so you have to have a paradigm that is quantifiable. And so then if you have these two dots, the objective is to say which box has more dots. Then they need an advisor. And so this is where your AI comes into play. This is where your tech comes into play. Any type of tech can be put into this paradigm, into this type of paradigm, sorry. And so anything that you do, whether it's perceptual, whether it's auditory, can be put into a paradigm like this and can be quantified. So what this is right here, this seems like a really busy chart. This is actually the graphical representation of my judge-advisor system. This is my targeting computer. So what happens is then in the paradigm, I randomly blind the advisor to certain amounts of the stimulus, okay, to mimic real life. And so the more that I blind, which is on the x-axis, so the blinding is along the x-axis, and then how accurate that it is on the y-axis. This is what the spread will look like for your AI. So it's easy to think, well, then why don't I just program it up to do a maximum sampling size and have the best accuracy? And the reason why for research is that real life doesn't always pan out that way. In a perfect world, we could have our dreams and desires work out every single time, but unfortunately, in the real world, there's often going to be clouding and shielding and heuristics involved and other types of stressors. So, but then as you have a quantifiable advisor, you can then have that meaningful pairing. And one of the most important things you could possibly do, that one thing that I said at the very beginning, is you can communicate confidence. But how do you do it? So what this is but this only works if you can quantify the advisor in your judge-advisor system. Once you have quantified the advisor in your judge-advisor system, then you can work out the probabilistic outcome that it is correct. And so, as some background, for every single dot difference, every single line on the previous chart, there were 10,000 trials run. So that's the training that you do. It took a week on a desktop computer. I should have used the supercomputer at the lab, but instead it took a week to run straight. What this is then is the probability that it's going to be correct. And so so then what does that mean? For every subsample, so as it took samples, or as it was blinded, what it could see from those two boxes, compared it. Said, okay, this one has 5 more dots. And so then it said, at 5 dots, at a dot difference of 1, I'm about 64% sure that I'm correct. That's how your advisor can then communicate calibrated confidence, not just confidence, but calibrated confidence. Because one of the fears is that people are more hard on algorithms that mess up for the same thing than they are on humans. And this is one of the reasons why we see algorithm aversion. It's very important to include an appropriate and realistic calibrated confidence measure from any tech that uses a probabilistic outcome. And so, just to kind of sum up here, what you can do is that when the advisor gives its advice, it can just do something like this. I think it's left, and I'm 75% sure that it's left. Now, in a research paradigm, what you would do is you would have the user give their answer first. They would get advice from an advisor, and then they have an opportunity to change their answer and their confidence. And so what we've seen is oftentimes, with communicated confidence, if the advisor agrees with them, their confidence will increase. If the advisor disagrees, it will decrease, and sometimes they will even change their answer. One of the things that we found through research is that when no confidence is given, when no calibrated confidence is given, they just say left or right, and that's theorized to be as very confident. So if there's no confidence given, that is perceived as a confidence statement. So if it just says left, that's perceived as being very, very confident. That has a higher impact on the user's confidence change than if they were to just give a calibrated confidence. But the interesting thing was, in controlled trials, even though that impacted them more on their confidence, they chose the one that gave them more information more often. So as technology developers, as technology users, a critically important point is to remember that people are going to choose to use your tech. And so if they choose to not use it or to just abandon it, that's that aversion piece. But they will choose to use something that's going to help them make a better decision. And adding calibrated confidence is one of the most important aspects that I could possibly add to the conversation. And there's no clock. Let me do a quick time hack. Perfect. Okay. So with that, there were more findings that we had, but I'm going to cut straight to this, to the key takeaways. Number one, communicate confidence in all of your tech, if at all possible. Especially if it's a probabilistic tech, where you need a human-machine team to make a decision. That one thing is at the forefront, in my opinion, of explainable AI. Because when you think about it, Luke doesn't have time to go and read a paragraph about the AI explaining what it was doing. He has time to make a shot, right? And that's it. So it's these types of small cues that can really impact user reliance and trust and their own confidence. Quantifiable controls. As you go to develop your tech, use tech, or to research it, have quantifiable controls. Too often in this field or in this space, it's an aspirational discussion, which is great. Those are good. Let's add a little bit of the quantifiable things as well, because those are the things that are going to drive essential design features in any type of technology. There's a large discussion right now about the ethics of AI and where they should be used. One of my contentions is that quantifiable metacognition should be used as a quantifiable ethical input. And so with that, thank you for your time. I think we'll turn it over for some questions.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Any questions from the floor before I come here? Okay, if you do, oh yes, there is one over there. Could we get the microphone over, please, Tom? And if you can just state your name and where you're from, please.
Thank you, Rod. Hello, that's a very interesting talk. So my name's Haroon. I do research at Pometry, where we do temporal graph analytics. One of the algorithms you just showed, what are the real-world applications I could use this in?
What are the real-world applications of the paradigm?
Yeah.
Perfect. And so what this is, especially this research that I just got after, the real-world applications have to do more with the human condition and how we interact. It's less of an applied, so it's not platform specific, but that's the beauty, in my opinion, of using this type of research. And so any type of technology that's developed, in my opinion, as much engineering that goes into the technology should also go into the research. Of course, that's me. I'm a scientist, so I have that bias. But one of the things, though, as you talk about communication of confidence and trust, the interesting thing is that pre and post advice, that confidence difference. When I said that confidence can change, when you use that pre and post advice, change of confidence, that is an implicit measure of trust. And so in any organization, in any type of application setting, if you were to use that implicit measure of trust, that can then impact training. And it should impact training, because too often when we're being sold a capability, especially if we're a big platform, and we're trying to be sold a capability, we're going to be sold the best product. We're going to get a sales pitch, and that's great. And I understand that that's how that works. When training happens, it needs to be realistic, so you can get an accurate assessment of how trust changes, especially when things go wrong. And so then, according to Gempler, 1980, if the actual reliability and the perceived reliability of any type of entity is 1-to-1, that's the actual reliance that should be demonstrated for that platform. Too often, though, we fall off that line, and we are either in the algorithm aversion or the algorithmic overtrust, where there's a heuristic reliance, and then the failure is felt on the back end. So there's a lot more that I could say on that. I don't have any specific examples right now that I could share, but hopefully that helps with that piece.
Looking at that line, would you say that the average person, there you go, an average person, would you say the average person is averse or pro the AI?
And it depends on, so the soft answer is that it just depends. It depends on context, it depends on the person, it depends on their motivation. If they are motivated to get it right, you'll find them expending more cognitive resources to think about the problem, to take in the information. But there are times when you're tired and you're just flipping through your phone and you're clicking on the news articles that have been given to you by the algorithm, right? So there's not a lot at stake for doing that. But if your life is on the line, then you are very much invested in trying to make a good decision. So going back to the training piece and why research is so important, and quantifying metacognition is critical, because when it gets to the training piece for your personnel, you want that one-to-one relationship so that they know how to use it appropriately in any given situation.
Okay. And you also mentioned early on in the presentation there about the important differentiation between automation and AI, I believe it was. Do people get confused between that? Do they think that automation is automatically AI?
So oftentimes in conversations, AI is used, autonomy is used, automation is used. And so in a previous talk that I gave last year here, I spoke about the automation spectrum. And that's something that we created that gives a taxonomic approach to all automation capabilities. And so it goes from a range of human-centric, you cross the threshold of a development through rules-based automation and then prediction-based. And prediction-based automation, according to our taxonomic approach, is the autonomy spectrum. And within the autonomy spectrum, which is the self-governing spectrum, is AI. And that's just one bin. There are many bins of automation capabilities. And they each have different reliability rates. So like an alarm clock, not a lot of us have problems with an alarm clock. That's a rule-based capability for keeping time. But there are various AI capabilities that we might not trust as well just yet.
Okay. Any more quick questions from the floor? Okay, yeah, can we bring the microphone down to the front, please? If you can just state your name, where you're from, and just try and keep the question as quick as possible, please. We do need to move on after this one. Thanks.
Hi, Sandra. I'm a doctorate student. So, quick question. I was just wondering. So, we're talking about confidence level, and your system and the user having a confidence level as well. So, let's assume I have a model that self-repairs, but also I'm going to use it for the health sector. So, I'm going to use my model or robot on an operation, and it's self-repairing, but at this particular time is working on 95% accuracy. What do you think is going to happen? So if I have a doctor that can say, okay, I could be 100% accurate, and then you have your machine saying, okay, for now, it's 95% accurate. What do you think? What's the juxtaposition? What's going to happen?
So this is a great question. And first of all, congratulations on your model being used in that way. I think that's phenomenal. This is a question I get a lot, especially at my other job. Because when you use AI, especially in any type of situation that could have a very significant impact, people want 100%. And so you have to communicate that a probability is a probability. And so that's really hard for some people to take. And that it goes back to, I think that there was a question about culture on Matt's talk. That is a cultural issue that as we adopt more simple rules-based capabilities at first, this is according to my research, that as we do simple rules-based first and then infuse that across the organization and build from there, that we'll build that cultural acceptance of these models. As we jump straight into these very complex models that have a very high impact with a probability of less than 100, that is still hard for people to accept. And they might accept 95 from a human. And so right now, though, I love where you're going with this, and I think that's the right direction. And I'd like to see more of that being pushed out into the real world, because that's where we need to go. So I don't have a good answer for how do you deal with that, other than you have to try to keep changing the culture, and we need to keep flooding the market with all of these types of automation to drive that cultural change.
Okay, great question. Thank you. That's another great session. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Right. Thanks.
Take that. Thank you.